Well, first Holmes was born, then he got fat, bald, and tired. What's up, Holmes?
Oh, I'm back. We think we fixed the technical problems, you guys. Thanks for bearing with us. Can you hear me, guys? You Guacamelee guys?
Yes, we can.
Oh, phew. So you were saying that Sony, it's not an exclusive relationship with them, but it's really worked out well. Is there any chance that Guacamelee could come to other platforms? A lot of Nintendo fans who feel very possessive of the Nintendo iconography saw all these wonderful references in Guacamelee to Mario, to Metroid, to games closely associated with the Nintendo brand, but they didn't get to play it. They're all pissed off, except they don't say that because it sounds mean. Anyway, yes. Answer the question, please.
So Guacamelee is also being done through the Pub Fund with Sony. So the Pub Fund, it means that we have to be exclusive to Sony for some period of time, and we're not allowed to say the numbers, but after the exclusivities end, we're definitely allowed to release it on other platforms. So it's definitely on the table. Yeah.
Huh. Tell us more about the Pub Fund. I don't know if everyone's heard of it before.
Okay, so the Pub Fund is something that Sony does with indie game companies pretty regularly. So what it is the independent developer has to self-fund the game to completion, and then once the game is released, Sony will pay them a chunk of royalties as if the game had sold a certain number of copies on day one. So what it does is it alleviates a lot of the risk of like you releasing a game and it completely flopping, like as a developer. So at least you know that you can plan for your next game afterwards. If you agree with Sony, if you agree to go with Sony on this Pub Fund, you at least have some like knowledge of financial stability after your game releases, because you know you're going to be at least guaranteed a certain amount of money, and then you can use that to plan your next game ahead of time. So you don't have to be worried so much about that. But then in exchange, you agree to do some exclusive period with them.
And your first few children.
And your first
few children. Graham said to have 3 children since the project began, but whatever.
It's okay. I didn't want them anyway.
Yeah, who wants kids?
And is that something that you have to apply to get into the Pub Fund, or can anyone just try to jump on board of that as long as they're willing to take the risk? I would imagine Sony would only give that to developers that had a lot of confidence in.
Yeah, it's a curated thing. You can approach Sony with an idea. We actually, for our first game About a Blob, we approached Sony Santa Monica first, and they weren't interested in the game, but then they pointed us to the other division of Sony that runs the Pub Fund program.
Yeah, I mean, I'd also add that they have a team now that is really present at a lot of the gaming expos. So if you're at PAX and you're around the indie booths, you'll see the Sony guys just wandering around. And they're really approachable, and they're making a really strong effort just to seeing what's out there. So, I mean, if someone, for example, had a game on their iPad and they just walked up to them and said, hey, check out this idea I have or something, they'd look at it. And from there, it might go forward and you get some contact info. So, yeah, they're pretty approachable, I'd say.
Yeah, that team is it's Brian Silva, Shane Bettenhausen, and Nick Sepner. And those guys are huge gamers, and they're like all over all the indie games. They know exactly what's going on in the scene, and yeah, they're really great guys and really approachable. And they're the guys you want to talk to if you want to be part of the Pub Fund for sure.
Shane, he worked for, was it IGN or 1UP for a long time, or both? He's been in the industry for a while. He helped develop El Shaddai as well, so he's been on the development side. Talk about an awesome dude. Should have him on this show sometime, you think?
Yeah, definitely. You should get any of those guys on the show. They're such riots. They're a good time.
And would you say because of them, Sony is leading in terms of getting smaller developers on consoles and also making them look like they're not small developers? Like Guacamelee doesn't look like a game made by 12, 13 people. It looks astounding. Would you say that Sony has something to do with the fact that their indie showings are looking so astounding? Is it partly them? Can we give them some responsibility?
I'm not 100% sure what's happening behind the scenes over there, but I do think it's their team that's really driving that indie initiative. You hear a lot of people talking about that. There's big events happening where Sony's showing a whole bunch of new indie games that are coming out on the Vita, and I think a big part of it is their team. Yeah, for sure, and yeah.
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, you know, they make a huge effort to know what's going on and what's new coming out, at least from the indie side of things. And I'm sure they have a reason for that. I mean, besides loving indie games, I think they also appreciate or see the value in having that content. So there's got to be a force there driving it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you guys have any thoughts on the Xbox One and how, just like the Xbox 360 is not allowing self-publishing, and a lot of people are saying that sends the exact opposite message that Sony is sending right now, whereas Nintendo, people are saying, is kind of in between. They seem to want indies involved, but they're not going quite as far as Sony is. So yeah, what do you make of where the three publishers are at in terms of indie relations right now?
I mean, I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think everyone's just going about it in a different way. I feel the Xbox One's gotten kind of a weird, bad rap. I think, their policy seems to be what their policy's been before. So they're not changing anything per se. And I think working with a publisher to get on the Xbox isn't the worst experience in the world. We know a few guys who it's been really positive. And sometimes publishers can really contribute something to a product, right? So, I mean, that's one way. Obviously, Sony's definitely taking a different initiative. Yeah, I think there's arguments to be made one way or another. That's a pretty wussy answer I just gave.
No, it's very even-handed, something you don't see in the discussion of video games all the time. And you're right, there was just a cavalcade of negativity after the Xbox One announcement, and it almost became kind of fashionable to hate it. Like, people liked joining in on mocking it together, whether it deserved to be mocked or not. So it's nice to hear you be so even-handed. And Nintendo, what do you think of those guys? They're all right.
No, fuck Nintendo. No, I don't know. Actually, Nintendo's been pretty open with us. You talk with them more than.
Yeah, Nintendo, they're very indie friendly too. It's just you need to reach out a little bit more to get to the right person there, and I think maybe they don't have as many people curating stuff, or I think they might have a bit of a bottleneck on their end, but they're definitely open to bringing indie games to their platforms. I think for the Xbox One, it still really remains to be seen. They really didn't talk at all about the future of Xbox Live Arcade, so I have no idea what's going to happen there. But it does sound like at least it's going to be kind of the same. Like you said, if you want to get on the platform, either Microsoft has to publish your game, or you have to get another publisher involved. And from an indie developer perspective, one thing that kind of sucks about that is if you have to get another publisher involved, it's like another person who has their hand in the pocket, because they're not going to do that for free. They're going to take a cut, right? So it's just less money coming to the developer in the end, which is something that you don't have to. If you can afford to self-publish on a Sony platform, then you don't have to get a publisher involved, and you get all the money. Just having that additional person in the loop is just like a bit of a nuisance sometimes, unless they're going to add something on the side, on the marketing side, or if they'll bring something else to the table. But really, you don't have the option. You have to do a publisher if you want to be on Xbox. So, yeah.
It gives publishers undue power, and they don't necessarily have to do anything. Like you said, since they know you don't have any other choice, they wouldn't necessarily have to offer you as much because you're kind of cornered. And I've even heard of people having to rent publisher time from publishers just to put their games on Xbox Live Arcade for a limited period of time, and then it gets taken off. So the less power given to the people who don't actually make games, I guess, the better. That's my opinion. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we obviously don't have a ton of experience because we've always been doing this ourselves. It can go either way, right? If a publisher is willing to be really friendly and do a lot of marketing effort, I mean, sometimes indie games are just terrible at marketing, right? They forget about doing it, and they might make a good game, and it just flops because there's no awareness. So at least publishers have some interest in making their money back, so they are going to, let's say, do a proper marketing job. But then again, I mean, I think more often than not, you hear horror stories of publishers pushing really hard deadlines or wanting to change the game and this and that. So I don't know.
Yeah, before we signed up to the Pub Fund with Guacamelee, we were talking to publishers about bringing it to Xbox. And we talked to a lot of different publishers, and some of the publishers are really trying to grab anything they can get for the project. Like this, they're like, yeah, we'd like to let you release on Xbox, but what are you going to give us? We want a piece of this. We want a piece of the PS3 version. We want a piece of that version, and because they want to make money, right? And we're just a small indie game, but they're a huge company. So for it to hit their bottom line at all, they're going to try and grab as much as they can. So it's kind of like from their perspective. From especially the bigger publishers, it's like really not even worth getting involved in smaller games. Like they're making all their money off Call of Duty and other huge franchises. So so they try and get as much as they can, which hurts the developer even more. So.
I wish they would see that Call of Duty didn't start massive as a massive series. It took some fostering of that and some belief in the idea for it to eventually get huge, and the same could be said of Minecraft and Mega Man and everything that's ever gone on to be huge started off as a big risk and an unproven idea at one point. And Guacamelee hopefully is huge now. That's a quite unproven idea. Luchador fighting / exploring / metaphysical reality world-bending Metroidvania exploration game. It's not one I would have thought I'd see in my lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, right? I kind of sympathize with these larger publishers. I mean, they have shareholders. They have to, they don't want to take risks, right? I mean, can you imagine going to shareholders as Activision and be like, all right, guys, we have this idea, Luchadors, Metrovania. Shareholders are like, no.
As everyone's eyes glass over.
Yeah.
Chris and I actually were pitching the game 2 years ago at GDC, just in a PowerPoint presentation, and it was like a pretty hard thing to pitch because it's kind of on paper, it's really out there, and until you have it in someone's hands and they're actually playing it and they can see it's fun, it's really a hard game to sell.
Yeah, they're like, we like the idea, but can you make it a first-person shooter and make it in the army? Because they're more on board.
And scrap that Mexico stuff.
Yeah, Mexico.
And where did the idea for Guacamelee come from? Where did it come from? Because it's such a combination of things. That's one of the things I loved about it the most. It's retro, but not like video game retro. It looked to me like my favorite cartoons from the 1990s, and had a lot of the focus on iconography and kind of reinvention of the fairy tale that I got in the 90s. But the gameplay also feels like 90s video game, though it doesn't look like it. Plus luchadors, and I have no idea where that came from. So how did you come up with that?
Our process for coming up with new ideas it's pretty open in the studio. We just send out an email to the team and we're like, hey, everybody, pitch us some ideas, and then we collect a bunch of ideas, and everyone in the team, has a couple minutes to pitch to the whole team. And I think for Guacamelee, at that time we got everyone to write up like a one-page summary of a game idea and 1 or 2 game ideas. So everyone on the team pitched their ideas, and Guacamelee was actually pitched. At least the concept of the story and the setting and the characters were pitched by our animator Augusto Quijano, who was actually from Mexico. So yeah, when you talk to him about it, he said like he was at this point he's been in Canada for about 5 years. He went to school for animation in Canada, and then he came to work at Drinkbox when he finished. And he was kind of feeling like homesick and nostalgic, and he was trying to think of games that he could try and like remind him of Mexico, like try and pull things from like his childhood basically. And a lot of the concepts from Guacamelee are like based on like little known myths from small Mexican villages. Like a lot of characters, Xtabay is one, or Huaychivo. Those characters are actually based on real things in Mexico. Well, real mythical things that some people in the small villages believe, right? So that's where the idea started. Like he came up with the idea of the characters and how the story would begin in the world of the dead. And then it kind of merged with some ideas from other people, like this concept of dimension swapping was something that I think Chris Harvey pitched. Like he had a game where you'd be able to swap between alternate dimensions. And the Metroidvania and the brawler aspects came from another idea. And all this stuff kind of mishmashed into what Guacamelee ended up becoming. So yeah, the ideas were basically like, it was kind of like picking the most interesting things from all of the game ideas and putting it into this Mexican setting that Augusto had come up with. And that's kind of how Guacamelee was born.
What? Nobody does. Because you grow up thinking, oh, I can get together with my friends and we'll all have ideas and make a video game together. And then you get old and you find out that there's always one guy who just wants it to be all his ideas and he tells everyone else what to do. And it's not to point out Ken Levine, but Ken Levine. That's what he does. And his games are great, don't get me wrong, but I've heard from so many people who work at 2K that he just, it's his way or the highway. But you guys actually run the democratic school of video game development? You do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a few ways to go about it. Ours is one way, and I wouldn't suggest it for everyone. It's not. There's definitely growing pains to it, right? Whenever you try to put everyone's idea into a process, you're going to come up to contrasting ideas, or they just won't work. I mean, we really threw everything in this game, and it was a lot of pain to make it work. But despite the pain, I think it actually made the game better.
Yep. Yeah, some people are worried that if you have too many chefs, then what you end up with is just kind of like a watered-down mess, and there's no focus to it. So you really have to be careful about throwing things in for the sake of them being in there. But yeah, at the same time, that like the way we came up with the original idea, and actually we have a demo video that we made in Flash it's online on YouTube, that you can watch it. And if you look at that video that's from 2 years ago, it's really close to how the game ended up being in the end. But even so, along the way, like as we're like fleshing out how the combat should work, how the area should be, we were really taking contributions from everyone on the team. There was never a single person who was like in charge of the design. And so if you had a good idea and the team would buy into it, your idea would probably get into the game. Getting the team buy-in is the hard part, though. So that's kind of like the decision maker. In our case, is kind of like the team. And our team is willing to take risks, which is a good thing. If it was like a risk-averse team, then I think the game would probably be a lot more watered down in the end. But like anything that was a good idea would get in the game. So yeah.
That's but whose idea is it to accept all of those ideas and to not be the kind of dictator of the whole thing? Who's the one who's willing to take the risks on everyone else's ideas?
I think everyone's willing to take the risks, but actually, since Graham was producer, he was the draconian naysayer.
Yeah, sometimes there would be ideas that would just like totally blow the scope of the game out of proportion, and I would just say, no, guys, sorry.
And I would keep on pestering Graham. I sit beside Graham, so just like, Graham, come on, you want to do this. This is a really good idea.
So they wanted to put a basketball mini game into this game for so long, and
we refused. We would take it out, and 1 week later, someone would put it back in somewhere else.
Whenever it was in there, it was so janky, and like it wasn't even fun, and it was like, come on, guys, please.
How did that work? The cut basketball game from Guacamelee.
I don't even know. There was this room with a ball in it.
Don't pretend you don't. You loved it.
And there was originally going to be 3 worlds as opposed to just the 2, and more of a blocking style combat system. Is that right?
Yeah, we were definitely going to have 3 worlds. The third was going to be the world of nightmares, which is the world where the Alabrijes were going to live, which is that giant monster in the middle of the game. Mm-hmm. I think in the end we have one environmental artist, Steph, and I think it just became too insane to have to do backgrounds or 3 art sets for every area of the game, and he still has to do 2 now, one for the light world, one for the dark world, and that in itself is somewhat of an insane insane amount of work for one person to do.
Yeah, and he constantly complains about it with just 2 worlds.
Yeah, well, I mean, he constantly complains about everything, but legitimately, that was a legitimate complaint.
Yeah, that might have just been technically impossible to do in the time constraints. Is he really proud of what he did? Just one guy did all that? Really? What?
Oh yeah. He's super fast and like really efficient. I think he doesn't like to do extra work for the sake of doing extra work, so he really figures out how to like optimize his process, like to get stuff in there. And to be fair, he did have an art intern come in to help out a little bit, which he was really happy about. But yeah, he's like super fast. He's been in the games industry for a long time. He used to work at Rockstar. He worked on The Warriors, and then he was working at Pseudo Interactive for a long time before coming to Drinkbox.
Oh, cool. That speaks to what Drinkbox's style is. I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about it. I'll tell you what I take your style to be, because what you just said about your background artist speaks to it. You guys don't waste much of our time, or just mind space. It's very efficient. The art direction is very efficient. You hit really hard with the iconography and the idea of what the characters are about, and don't waste too much time dancing around it, and move really quick from one thing to the next, and just try to throw as many ideas, which now I'm finding come from so many different people at me from different directions. So it kind of feels like getting in a fist fight with a really attractive woman, and she's winning. I can't stop looking at her, and she's hitting me from every angle. And I'm just like, this is great. Get my ass kicked, though. It's fun. Is that what your style is?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, that's actually in our document. That's funny enough. That's
Word for word.
Word for word. That must have got leaked. No, I mean, it's nice to hear that. You know, I mean, I think for us, we just really want to give people just a unique experience. We want to create something that's different for us, but more importantly, we want to give people a game where they sit down and they say, "Oh, this is something different." You know, this is not the standard just shovelware that you might get. So I think that forces us to keep ourselves on point with the ideas we want to get across and the gameplay we want to get across and stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess, you know, like exactly what Chris said. We try and stay as focused as we can, and like every area in the game is kind of trying to be like a bit cut and dry and different from every other area, and trying to keep everything clean and its own thing. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Is it thing that caused you to want to make Drinkbox Studios a reality? This urge to do things differently than the big publishers you were working for go about them, and to do an original voice while still coming up with ideas that are just purely entertaining?
Yeah, I think one of the big driving things when starting Drinkbox was we just wanted to have a place where everyone had, you know, input into the games, because I feel like when you work at a bigger company, you're kind of like a cog in the wheel. The bigger the company, the smaller the cog you are, and unless you're like at the very top and you're one of the dictators.
Ken Levine, for example.
Yeah. And you know, we try to do that at Drinkbox. That's one of the reasons we're not really planning to make Drinkbox much bigger than it is, because we kind of like the size that it's at, and the fact that everyone kind of has a voice in the game, and it feels good, like when you put a game out and, you know, you can look at parts of it and know that was you, that was the one who contributed to that part of the game. And when you work on bigger games, you know, the part that you contribute to can be so insignificant that you don't really get that same sense of pride. But I do think, like, every time Drinkbox releases a game, people at the studio really feel proud, like, because they really see themselves in the games. So
Yeah,
something that it's hard to get at a big company.
Absolutely, and I've heard about studios such as yours starting off at your size, and once they blow up to 80 or 90 people, that feeling goes away, that individual sense of pride goes away, and people start leaving the studio and starting their own studio. So it's a really bold decision to keep it small, but does that mean you'll just have more money to go around for everybody else who works there?
Wait, is there a lot of money? Is there a lot of money that's going around? Because if there is,
yeah, well, we hope eventually that, you know, when the money starts rolling in, then it'll everyone that works at the company will be, you know, justly rewarded. So yeah.
Of course,
rich. We're never going to be rich.
Yeah.
Well, it seemed to me from the outside looking in that you grew really fast. I didn't realize you'd been around for 5 years or so. The first game you'd done I'd heard of was Mutant Blobs Attack, and I think that got a lot of attention because people are like, what's on the Vita? Oh, this game's on the Vita, and it's good. So original new idea for your original new console. But then with Guacamelee, people wouldn't stop talking about your game, myself included. So do you feel like you've grown at a huge rate, kind of a sudden burst of growth, or do you feel like it's been more gradual?
The awareness of the company seems to be growing pretty quickly, for sure. Yeah, like with Mutant Blobs Attack, we could feel it growing a little bit, but with Guacamelee, it seems to be growing a lot faster now. And you know, that feels really good because, you know, for a long time, like, we released our first game and it kind of came and went.
They're like, have you make a game? Yeah, about a blob on the PS3. People are like, what?
We've never heard of it.
We have never heard of that game.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, don't download it. It's not real.
Yeah, and so it does feel good, like that we're starting to establish a reputation, and the reputation is a good reputation, and
we would have taken a bad reputation too. We were just looking for any reputation.
We just looked at it.
Yeah.
Have you found that your opportunities have changed now that you are so well known and you have such a critically acclaimed game? Has that changed your place in the industry as you see it?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. Our emails don't get ignored as much. That's what I noticed. That's actually the largest thing I noticed is people will respond to me.
Yeah, people kind of know who you are now, which is nice. And even when we went to PAX East, just before the game came out, people were coming up to us and saying, "Hey, we love Mutant Blob's Attack." That was the first time we went to a public show since Mutant Blob's Attack had come out.
Yeah, it was actually, I mean, it's one of those. We've done so many shows before that, and it's always trying to pull people in and say, "Hey, this is what we're doing." It's the first time people came up to us and said, "We know who you are," and it blew us away. It was awesome. You know, it feels really good for that to happen.
Yeah, so it took 5 years, but now it seems like we actually starting to have some fans, which is nice.
We have like 5 fans. Like, besides my mom, we have at least a few more.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, she's been doing it.
There's that artist that did that excellent Guacamelee kind of poster with Juan covered in the tattoos. That's totally awesome. You have some dedicated creative fans for sure. So now that you've gained this place in the industry, what do you think you would want to do to capitalize on the power that you've obtained? Because you're powerful now.
What do you want to do with our power?
I think we just want to try and keep the snowball going as much as we can, and make sure that the next thing that we put out is also interesting and continues our trajectory. We don't want people who are like fans of the studio right now. We don't want to disappoint them. So just like we're trying to be careful about what we do next and make sure that it's going to be something cool.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great if the studio could just be known for a studio that makes good games. So when a game comes out, you don't have to worry, like, oh, the game's from the studio, and I'm going to buy it. And I mean, I have studios personally for me that are like that. So, yeah, or at least people who make games, I say, well, they made it, I'm going to get it. They've already earned my trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, trust.
Yeah, it goes a long way. And just affection when you make a game that people really feel was cared about, and therefore the audience was cared about, they'll care about the developers back and stick through things with them, like new risky ideas. They'll give a shot to them. I'm curious about which developers are like that for you guys, which ones you kind of follow anywhere they decided to go.
Well, for sure for me, John Blow, like with Braid, he totally cemented himself. Like I'm really looking forward to The Witness. And I don't know, there's a lot of indie studios that are kind of like that for me too.
I mean, anything that Game Company was putting out.
Yeah, they're a big one.
Once Flow came out, it was great, and everything after that, didn't think twice. I mean, and we have developers too, especially guys local in Toronto. I mean, Capybara Games, whatever they put something out, you just know it's going to be something that's interesting. I mean, Capybara is a great example of that, right?
And Queasy also, they're fantastic with Sound Shapes and Everyday Shooter and.
Yeah, I mean, even if the game's not maybe right up your alley, at least it's going to be an experience that's different and somewhat interesting.
And yeah, like Clay now is one of those for me as well. Like,
right.
Like they're trying really different things and like really doing well. Yeah.
Are all those guys Canadian? I think almost, except for John Blow. That was a Canadian super force.
That's just a coincidence. Yeah. We're not trying to hype up Canada, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it just happens to be that way. I'm not sure why that is. I don't think we're more creative. Maybe we're just.
Maybe there's nothing else to do.
Yeah, I think
except make games.
Yeah.
Oh, I've always Canadian comedians are some of my favorites, and I've always attributed that to a little bit more humility and a little bit less starstruckness than you might get in the United States, because the Americans are known for being a little cocky, a little self-confident, whereas Canada, from what this is very racist, sorry Canadians, I just get the feeling that Canada has this sense that it's not like a God-given right to be number one, and you fight for it a little harder, you Canadians. That's what I love about you.
Yeah, no, that's I think that's maybe appropriate. There's a
racist?
No, well, I mean, it's okay if you're racist. I mean, we're very racist at the studio. Nobody should come in. You will feel very bad. But where am I going with that? I think another part is Canadians often live in their parents' basement, and that's a great way to start making games. I'm not sure.
But there is a huge indie game scene in Toronto. Miguel Sternberg's up there. Loads of people. I think is Damien Somner up there. Do you guys know him, Damien Sommer?
I know Damien Sumner, but I don't know if I don't know where he is.
Yeah, that's true though. It seems to be a ton of people are in Toronto. Queasy Games, Capybara.
The guy who made Starseed Pilgrim, he's also. I just met him last week.
Right.
He's also in Toronto.
And Sean McGrath, the Dtoid, he's in Toronto.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not sure.
Well, right. Philfish.
Philfish is in Montreal.
He was in Montreal. But I think a part of, actually, joking aside, why we have so many successful indies in Quebec and Ontario is that the government has some pretty great funding for small independent studios, and I think actually in Ontario it demonstrates that it does work in the end. At least when you look at Toronto. Yeah,
the guys who made N Plus at MetaNet, they're also here.
Yeah,
it's a really tight community too. Like these guys, everyone gets together, and there's a lot of events, and everyone's hanging out. It's pretty cool.
Makes making video games seem like a cool guy thing to do, as opposed to a not cool guy, which is what a lot of people assume. It's like, oh, those are the not cool guys, but you guys are pretty cool guys, I think.
It's only you only look cool to gamers. Anybody outside of gamers, they just look at you like you're a bunch of nerds.
Yeah, I mean, we wear the same clothes most days. I wear bathing suit to work every day in the summer.
It's true.
And in Toronto,
it's embarrassing.
It is embarrassing. Toronto's the financial district of Canada, so I think we kind of look like the slums. We look like clowns out and about.
Yeah.
Those are always the coolest guys, though. The guys who are willing to be clowns, in my opinion. I don't know, what does cool even mean? It's hard to say. But I did want to ask. You said before, I've been watching very closely and putting pieces together and the things you're saying to try to build a puzzle of what you're doing next. You said you have some people maybe working on some things in smaller groups among the 13 of you. Could it be?
Yeah, I think for us, what seems to work in the past is always having one game being worked on while another game's being worked on.
Yeah,
we just had a game jam, actually, our first game jam at Drinkbox a month ago. So we had some interesting ideas that popped out of that. So we might be working on one of those right now, along with other things.
Yeah, some of the other things that we are working on, like a very small team is working on DLC stuff right now. We have two DLC packs that are going to come out for Guacamelee over the coming months. I don't know if I could say much more than that, but one of them has already been submitted to Sony, and the other one we're still working on it. So that's what one small group of people is working on. And then the rest of the team are kind of split up also. Like some are looking into new things, some are looking into something I can't talk about. But, yeah.
Well, exciting. So at least 2 things are happening, maybe more. Pretty awesome. That's
maybe more.
Yeah.
Oh,
more things going on if I was to keep track.
And you say you had a game jam. Was that an internal game jam just amongst the employees of Drinkbox?
Yeah, kind of like how we did the one-page pitches last time. We did a similar thing, and we got a bunch of those things back. And this time we thought, okay, we actually have some bandwidth. Like Guacamelee had just shipped, and we actually we took 3 or 4 days to like pick the ones that we were most interested in, and we split the team up into 4 groups of 3,
yep.
And built out 4 of the ideas as much as we could in 3 days. And they all turned out pretty interesting, actually. We can't really go into specifics because we might actually end up making one of these games.
They were all shooters. They were all first-person shooters.
But they were all really completely different. One of them was like 3D top-down. We made that one in Unity. One of them was like a touch-based kind of thing.
Yep.
One of them was made like using scaled-down Guacamelee characters.
One was multiplayer mayhem.
Multiplayer mayhem. Yeah, that's
one
right.
was multiplayer mayhem.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Huh, that's awesome. Is that So you said you used Unity for one of them. All of the separate teams had some programming and art and design players in there?
Yeah, we split the teams up. So it was 4 groups of 3, and each team definitely had a programmer. I think my team had 2 programmers. Well, it depends if you count me as a programmer or not. I'm kind of no longer a programmer, but yeah, everyone had a programmer. Some of the teams didn't have an artist, so there was like programmer art in there, and everyone was kind of acting as a designer. So
yeah. And I mean, and for the guy in Unity, that specific one, he had just been working a lot in Unity for other projects. So he just worked fastest in Unity, so he happened to use that.
Awesome. We have questions in, and I should get to them. Ugh. I wonder if we're going to go long today because the show kind of pooped out on us in the beginning. Before I do the questions, I'm going to run an idea I just had right before the show started. I'm going to probably write a feature about it. I think Nintendo should start running game jams with people like you. They should get you and John Blow and Clay and Flambeer and everyone and just say, here's Mario. 5 of you, do a thing, and you'll get some of the money and we'll get some of the money. Would you want to do that? Do you think that's a good idea, or is that dumb?
I think it's a really interesting idea. If they were to
actually let us do that, I think we would do
let's say that they said, like, okay, for the new Super Mario Brothers 3DS game, we want Drinkbox Studios to make 3 levels. We want Flambeer to make 3 levels, and we're going to do this indie downloadable pack of levels for this thing. I think that would be really cool, and I would love to play something like that, and I would love to work on something like that.
Yeah, I think we'd be honored and be excited to do it. Right? We all played that game growing up, so it'd be wicked.
Yeah,
I get this sense that there's a lot of developers, maybe like you guys, who grew up with Nintendo games, and those were some of the games you learned design from. But now you're in a position to make games your own, and you want to stand out and be in the spotlight and have your voices be heard. And that's not always the best fit for Nintendo consoles. A lot of third-party developers tell me that when they develop for Nintendo, it's kind of like guaranteeing you're going to be in the shadow, at least somewhat. Whereas on Sony and PC and Apple, you can embrace the spotlight. So if Nintendo were to give the spotlight to these developers who are potentially making the next Call of Duty and the next Mega Man and all that, these young, fired-up developers gave them the opportunity to, not own Mario forever, but to just have them for an afternoon, see what you come up with. I can't see how anyone could lose from that.
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, I don't know. It's true, right? You often hear troubles third-party developers, I guess, have on the Nintendo platform. I'm not sure.
I guess they did do something like this with Metroid, didn't they? I like the Metroid Prime game. I thought was made by another studio. I'm not sure actually, but
they kind of bought the studio. It was Retro, and they were just like, "Oh, we liked that game, so now we just own you." But the Nintendo Japan has done some things. Like they gave a gentleman, Shigesatsu Itoi, I think that's how you say his name. He was just a Japanese essayist, and they're like, "Want to make RPGs?" And he made 3 of them, and they were awesome. And now he's just hosting Iron Chef. He doesn't even make games anymore. It's the Earthbound series he made. They had indie devs make some WarioWare games just once, and then never again. That was maybe like 4 years ago. So it is possible, maybe kind of. I think they should hire you guys to make a badass Metroid game. That'd be fun.
I hope Miyamoto's watching right now because it'd be really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they were willing to let go, I mean, I suspect there might be a problem of letting go of your IP to let us do whatever we want with it.
There's definitely a lot of trust involved, and they spend so much time building that stuff up.
Yeah, it's true, but it'd be fun. I always wonder if it's the lack of Nintendo supporting third party, or if it's just people aren't into third-party stuff as much. I've always wondered that about Nintendo, actually, what the cause is, or why maybe third parties don't do so well.
I think that, from what I've gathered anyway, it is third parties feeling like they expect to do poorly, so then the audience thinks, oh, third parties aren't really going to try because they expect to do poorly, and then third parties do poorly, and then they say, oh, well, that, it's kind of like asking out that good-looking girl who said no to you. The next time you ask her out, you're going to be like, I know you're going to say no, but yeah, you want to, I don't know. I mean, of course she's going to say no after that. Third parties are never given the chance to have that confidence that they may have where they're not overshadowed. like they would be on Nintendo. That's why you guys should make the new Metroid.
Okay, sure.
Let's do it.
Tell them we're in.
Did Nintendo say anything about all the Metroid imagery in Guacamelee? Because it's pretty. This is the thing that really communicated to me most quickly that you guys were on the same wavelength as me when I saw. I think that was me and you, Chris, back in 2011 when I first played it. When I saw that Chozo statue and turned it into a chicken ball, I knew exactly where you guys were at, and I was pretty excited about it. So has Nintendo said anything to you guys about that?
I'm surprised we haven't been sued, to be honest. No, I'm joking.
I don't know what you're talking about. There is no references to Metroid in the game.
No references to any Nintendo products.
But no one.
Cut this podcast. It's over.
No one has said anything to us. No one has said anything to us, positive or negative, from Nintendo. But like it. Let's say theoretically we were directly referencing Metroid. I think. It's the kind of thing that, as if I was Nintendo, I would be flattered because we're not stealing, we're paying homage to, and just calling attention to something that was great. That we're happy to call attention to something that we all loved. And I just bought Super Metroid on my Wii U for 30 cents, and I'm replaying it now. And everyone should buy it for 30 cents if you have a Wii U. It's an amazing game. It still holds up today, and I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of like the same thing that's kind of happening with Nintendo on YouTube right now. How they started to go for advertising royalties and stuff. I find it really confusing because those people are doing that they're advertising Nintendo by doing that stuff. And Nintendo seems to be kind of taking they're putting up barriers to this free advertising that they were getting because now people are less inclined to do that kind of thing. And I don't know. In today's world, I feel like this kind of thing, like paying homage and and doing Let's Plays and stuff, it's just part of the world we live in now, and it actually benefits the company that is receiving the homage or receiving the views of those games. Nintendo doesn't seem to understand that from the way that they're behaving on that stuff. So I don't know. It's a bit weird.
Yeah. Absolutely. I get the sense that Nintendo is kind of in the DNA of almost everyone who grew up playing video games at this point. So there's no changing that, and there's no controlling that. There's no way Nintendo can be like, all Nintendo-like ideas are ours, because it's what we're made out of at this point. So they might as well just let people run wild and get to be a part of it in some way. Like actually hire these Let's Players to play their games for them for the free advertising, and hire you guys to actually make a Metroid. I mean, you've already got Metroids in your game. They might as well, or do you? Are those Metroids in that game?
There's no Metroids, no.
No, nothing. John, we told you there are no Nintendo references in the game. Just drop it. Just drop it.
Like a dog with a bone. I should do these questions, though. I'm being a dink. Now, Sasbeska now asks about the PS Vita dev kit. Can you guys answer me if you compare the DualShock 3 to the Vita? Because the PS Vita dev kit has an HDMI port. Whoa, who is this guy? How does he know so much about dev kits and ports and whatnot? Is that anything you can comment on that? Kind of insider question?
How does he know that?
I don't know. I think that we can neither officially confirm or deny HDMI ports in the dev kit, but
right.
I think a lot of the journalists that we've talked to have told us that they believe that there's an HDMI port in the dev kits, and they're not able to get the dev kits themselves, so they're a bit disappointed by that because they would love to have the ability to capture video directly from those things.
Yeah, we've been told the older dev kits, the originals, have HDMI.
Yeah,
in them.
Yeah, but
as for pairing, I don't know.
I think that for me, the DualShock is a better controller for sure. But I love the D-pad on the Vita. The D-pad on the Vita feels like really super great. I wish it wasn't like so close to the top because it makes like the left trigger kind of awkward. But the feeling that D-pad is like the ultimate D-pad. It's like I don't know what it is. I don't know what it's made out of, but it's like shiny and glass.
You're just a Sony fanboy. Just give it up.
Anyway. But the DualShock I think is a better controller. I don't like the tiny thumbsticks on the Vita, the dual thumbsticks. Yeah.
I'm okay with all of them. I'm not too hard to please. The controller I probably hate the most is the N64. I'm still just what was that thing they did? It's like a boomerang with a stick. Anyway, I did want to ask if you can talk about it, how sales on Guacamelee might have compared on the PS Vita versus the PS3. Were they similar? Was one much larger than the other? Anything you can say about that?
Okay, yeah, I think I can talk about it a little bit. Overall, like worldwide, our sales are pretty even between the two platforms. But in Europe, the game outsold, the Vita version outsold the PS3 version. And then in North America, in the Americas, the PS3 version outsold the Vita version. So it depends which continent you're talking about. I don't know why. I think we got a lot of promotion in North America because we were part of this the Spring Fever event. So we had a lot of placement in the dashboard and stuff. So probably that resulted in like higher PS3 sales, and I don't know if that's going to continue now. Out like through May because we haven't gotten our sales reports yet. So, but like if you look worldwide, it's pretty evenly split. Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting because install base wise, the PS Vita is way behind the PS3. But to know that just as many people are using their Vita to buy a game than PS3 owners is quite telling. Is the fact that when people buy a Vita, they want to buy games on it and are willing to do that. So though it is for people who haven't played it or bought it, it is cross-buy. So if you buy it on the PS3, you still get it on the Vita. So it's really just a matter of where you make the purchase. You get the game on both consoles either way, which was nice of you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. We wanted to do that from day one, and when we first signed the Pub Fund contract, though, it didn't account for like that possibility. So we weren't sure if we were going to be able to do it up until really close to when we submitted it, the final game to be published. So, but we're happy that everything worked out in the end, and we were able to do that because we don't really think that a lot of people would purchase it on both anyway, and it's just a nice gesture to the gamer, like. And we wanted to include like the cloud save stuff so that you could pick up and play, and that really only made sense if you got both versions. So
yeah, I mean, I think like for me, I think us personally as gamers, we like it. So it'd be kind of weird if we then didn't offer it for our own game.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, do what you would like and then offer it to people to see if they'd like it too. It's a way to put out a genuine product, which you're doing. Have you talked much about the PS4? I've heard that has. They're encouraging a lot of developers to have the same kind of functionality with the Wii U on that using the PS Vita, that off TV is maybe a standard feature of the PS4. Have you heard any rumors about that?
What rumors have you heard, Graham?
So I don't know. This is maybe a bit touchy subject because I don't know what we're allowed to say or not. But
we were on a list.
We were on a list somewhere that said that we were a PS4 developer, so I think we're allowed to say that.
Yeah, we were definitely on a list that said we were a PS4 developer. So admit to that.
I think that like the way that we did the dual screen functionality for Guacamelee. It's not certain that the PS4 will have the exact same way. There's multiple ways to do what we did, and the way we did it was doing something called sub-display, and I'm not sure if the PS4 will have that same sub-display feature. But I think the crossplay stuff. If we wanted to do something similar on PS4 for Guacamelee, we would just have to do it a different way than we did it for PS3.
Yeah, I suspect that you're going to see a lot more integration of that. With the PS4, and there's going to be some pretty interesting things that people are going to do, or that can be done with it. So that's actually pretty exciting, to be honest.
Yeah, I was worried that Sony, after seeing the Wii U not take off in sales as much, they weren't going to be as driven to mimic what Nintendo was doing with the Wii U, which was disappointing to me because off-TV play, as a married man, it's essential. I play a lot of games just on the controller, on the Wii U controller, and on the PS Vita too. So hoping they keep running with that because it's, I think, something.
Yeah, I think they said something pretty recently that every PS4 game will have the remote play functionality.
Yeah.
I believe they said that publicly last week or something. So that's as a Vita owner, that's something that's really excited me as well because in my house, the television is, it's a resource that has contention. My fiance wants to watch Dancing with the Stars.
And what his fiance wants, his fiance gets. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. I've seen a whole lot of Kitchen Ramsay's Nightmares, or whatever it's called. Some man has nightmares in the kitchen. I don't know if you've seen it. My wife loves that show. I can't pay attention to it. More questions, though. R. Xanadu asks, how would you personally make a game with no HUD or menus? And Guacamelee is pretty low on menus. There's just a few meters and not too much else. So you definitely are good at streamlining. But how would you go about removing that entirely? It's a hard question. Jeez.
That's tough. I think like you can do stuff like I think like what Dead Space tries to do is they put stuff directly on the character. Gears of War has like, well, they do have some HUD stuff for weapons, but like they make your health as like an overlay that fades in or becomes more like the transparency. What's the word? Anyway, yeah, there's things you can do, but I think one thing that Mario does quite well is the newer Mario games, they fade it out so it's not there until you need to see it. Like if you haven't picked up a coin for a while or you haven't got hit, your HUD won't be there. But then when you do take a hit, the hearts show up and then they fade out again. And that kind of stuff is a lot less obtrusive. So that's one way you can kind of do it. We reserve the top of the screen in Guacamelee. We have a black bar up there, so that's always displaying, and that's we just did that to reserve that space for any HUD elements we needed. But we are definitely thinking about ways of like trying to get rid of the HUD and just have the whole screen be gameplay. That's because that really is the ideal if you can make that happen.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think there's a real design elegance to being able to remove a HUD, and I think often or sometimes it can come down to resources too. If you start running out of time, the easiest way to get the information across, unfortunately, is to be heavy-handed about it and put it in the HUD. But for games that do find ways to remove it, I think it's really nice to see, and it's elegant and sort of a beautiful thing to see in games.
Yeah, I would. It doesn't distract, and of course, it packs more of a punch to not have anything pulling you out of it, and that's something, as I've said, I think you guys are particularly good at. Kohino asks, whose idea design was the tool tree level in Guacamelee? Tool tree. Remember that one?
Yeah, I didn't. Was that?
Depends which part of the Tula tree you're talking about.
Yeah, there's the Tula tree and there's the Tula tree tops, and the Tula tree is mostly Teddy, I think.
Yeah, it's mostly Teddy.
Yeah, the Tula tree tops have been complained about a little bit being pretty difficult, but it's a completely optional area. So I think if he's talking about the Tula tree, yeah, that's one of my favorite areas also of the game. That's the first place you go after you get the dimension swapping ability. And it starts to like train you in different ways to use it, and it gets pretty challenging. It's also like, the combat in that area is also pretty interesting because you're starting to dimension swap while you're fighting guys, and having to deal with that and the barriers, and then the dimension swap platforming starts to get pretty challenging in there as well.
Yeah, I will say I did a lot of the tuning for the game, for platforming difficulties, and that the original design for that level was actually way tougher than it was, and it's still really tough now. Not to take away from it. But it used to be impossible. But now it got toned down a bit. But yeah,
people complained about it being too hard. That's always so surprising to me that people complain about a game being hard, especially an optional section like that. How do you take those complaints when people are like, "Oh, I didn't beat the game in the first night like I wanted. I'm mad about it." Is it something you respect, kind of unconditionally because it's coming from your audience, or do you sometimes disregard comments like that?
Yeah, we try to delete all negative feedback.
No, it's kind of like you get two different sides to it because the difficulty. So there are some difficulty spikes, and we acknowledge that we kind of missed like Jaguar Javier is a bit hard for some people. But we wanted him to be hard, and maybe we just made him a little bit too hard. That's all. And the Tula Tree Tops was always meant to be the hardest part of the entire game. We really wanted people to struggle through that, and when you actually end up finishing it, it feels really great. Like the reward is because that's probably the last secret area that people will do because it's like the hardest one to finish. So the feedback you get is like, this game is too hard, I can't finish this area, why did you make it so hard? But then on the flip side, you get people who finally made it through, and they're like, I loved that, and the challenge was great, and I'm really glad that you guys put that in there like that. So you get kind of both sides of the story. And I don't know, that the Tula Tree Tops is kind of what we wanted it to be. I think it's exactly the right difficulty that we want it to be. Even in the studio, for us to finish it, like the guys who work at Drinkbox, it's hard for some people. Like once you figure out how to do it, it's okay. But the first time was really hard, and but you get this sense of satisfaction when you finish it. That if it was easier, you wouldn't get that same sense of satisfaction. So the difficulty is really intended.
Mm-hmm. I can guess that you attracted some consumers that maybe didn't know how hard your game was going to get, because it's initially, I wouldn't say easy, but it's definitely, you can jump right in as long as you pay attention. You can, and if you've played some video games before, you can figure it out. There's not a lot of complicated combos and stuff like that. It's very welcoming. But then you are willing to kick an ass or two later on, which I respected a lot. And I think a lot of people who love Japanese shoot-'em-ups and roguelikes would respect it. But there's sadly this new generation of people playing video games that are expected to just kind of press B to win, and when they aren't handed that, sometimes they get a bit unruly on the internet. I've seen some comments be quite negative. So it sounds like you've experienced a little bit of that side of things.
Yeah. Well, we said yeah at the same time. Jinx, Graham, we can talk now. Yeah, I mean, the thing with difficulty tuning is it's always really tough, right? You want the game to be as accessible as possible so that most people can enjoy it. But you don't want to make it too accessible, because then you're not going to provide the challenge for a certain number of people. So, I don't know, there's this constant, we get a lot of external playtesters play the game originally, and I find it a very challenging balance to find that perfect sweet spot difficulty to make people feel good and hopefully not alienate too many people. But some people were alienated, and I feel kind of bad when they just give up at some part of the game and they say, "You suck," in an email.
Yeah, and this, I don't know. The sad part about it is, like, those parts of the game, like whenever we get emails like that, I always try and send them like a link to a video or something, because those parts are not actually that hard if you know how to do it. And the problem is that they're just not doing it like the combat in the game gets quite complex, and if you get to Jaguar and you're not used to dodging, if you've just been like trying to fight enemies and you haven't been using dodging properly, you really get blocked there. And I guess that the problem is a bit of a failure on our part to make sure that there was easier versions of Jaguar beforehand that forced you to dodge more or forced you to fight in like using more advanced strategies. But I feel like once you see how to do it, and you're like, the light bulb can go on, and you're like, okay, I understand how to do this now, and you can get past it. It's just like that. Maybe we didn't lead people enough, like handhold them enough to get to that point.
Well,
we could have done a better job of that.
I was amazed that you were able to make the game at all and tune the difficulty at all, honestly, because to have it also be compatible with two-player co-op, that's got to throw off the difficulty curve entirely. You have to think, how hard would this be with one person, but also not easier but not harder, but the same with two people? How'd you guys even do that?
We played around with like scaling the enemy damage, enemy health when you drop the second player in, and we just tried to find a balance where it was feeling about the same. But the co-op is actually a little bit easier when you're doing combat than it is, just because you can crowd control so much easier. You don't have to worry as much about when you have two people fighting the enemies and throwing the enemies around. Unless you make the enemies do like huge amounts of damage, like totally throw off the numbers. It's hard to make it about the same difficulty level as with a single player.
Yeah, I mean, with that said, I'd say co-op's also way more difficult platforming when you have co-op. And it's something I think we wish we had a bit more time to have addressed or smoothed out for the final game, but we didn't. But yeah, so there's plus and minuses of co-op.
I'm glad you didn't change it. I liked it exactly as it was. I gave it a pretty high score. 9 out of 10? Is that what I gave it? I can't remember. Let's see. Questions. Looming Shadows asks, how is publishing a game on Steam? Question mark.
Was it how is or how was?
How is? How is publishing a game on Steam? How is?
That's a good question. We brought Mutant Blob's Attack to Steam. It's on Steam. You should buy it. It's but yeah, I think things have changed now with the green light. It's a little bit more difficult for indies to get their games on Steam because you have to go through the green light process. But if you like previously to that, it was really easy to get a game on Steam, and anyone could get a game on Steam. I don't know what the future of Steam holds though. Like,
who knows what Steam holds?
Yeah, I think it is.
I don't
it's
think
like
they know.
it's turned into a pretty competitive process to get your game on Steam for an indie developer. Just because, for Greenlight, you really have to market your game well. You really have to have a good game if you want to be able to market it well and get people to upvote you. You see a lot of people like at PAX now with little stickers on their booth or little signs that say "Vote for this on Greenlight" because they're trying to do their best to promote their game on Steam. So I think it's all of a sudden it's kind of like this competitiveness. There's good sides and bad sides. I think like it's kind of like a curation process. So Steam is not going to turn into iOS where you don't know what's good and there's a million things. There's like 100 new games a day. But at the same time, for a developer, it's much more difficult because you have to spend a lot of time marketing and trying to make yourself stand out from all these other Greenlight games. So I think that's kind of how it is now. But we haven't had to go through that Greenlight thing yet, so we really don't know. We're just kind of hearing secondhand from other indies.
Sure. How big of a difference do you think it makes to get your game on Steam as opposed to just releasing it on PC in any old place or sticking just to consoles? Do you see Steam as being worthy of how much people desire it and how badly developers want to get on there?
Yeah, I mean, we have experience in Steam. What it seems to be, well, not necessarily from our experience, but Steam is definitely a juggernaut when it comes to indie games and getting indie game exposure to people. There's so many users on Steam, and they seem to be very engaged with games that aren't necessarily mainstream. So at least from an indie perspective, that's pretty great. So it's pretty important getting on Steam, it feels. You hear stories all the time, and we know other indie devs who sell ridiculous number of copies during Steam sales or just otherwise. So I think for an indie dev point of view, being on Steam is pretty important just because the Steam community is really strong for indie devs at Steam. It's really, really, really strong.
I think if you compare Steam to consoles, on consoles, there's less games coming out, so you have less competition. Like on your launch week, there's less competition. You'll stay at the top of the lists for longer. Steam has games coming out more frequently, so you fall off that stuff pretty quickly. But if you have a good game and you can convince Steam that your game is good and you can get them to feature you, the potential revenues on Steam are really, really high because they have a huge user base. Like they have a lot of people downloading games all the time. And if you can get into like the Steam sale, the summer sale, or any other promotions, the same thing. Like people are buying games like crazy on those things. So. From a financial side of things, being on Steam is a really good thing.
Yeah, and I'd say compared to consoles, Steam users always download games. That's the only way you get games. So they're more inclined to buy a downloadable game.
Yeah, versus retail games.
Retail on the console, a lot of people just buy retail games. So for them, they never even go on the store or buy any games downloadable. So I think that's also kind of a big difference there.
Do you think Drinkbox could have existed if it weren't for downloadable sales? For that distribution method, could you have made it somehow at the retail space?
I think it would have been a lot harder for sure. I don't know exactly.
No way.
It's possible. It would have been a really different road to take. But I think like the existence of these downloadable avenues is definitely good for all the indies. Like I think a lot of indie companies probably wouldn't exist if they weren't able to publish downloadable in a download way.
Sure. If you look at somebody like WayForward, they put out a Game Boy Color game, and then like 3 years later they put out a Game Boy Advance game, and then once downloadable services come out, they've got like, 20 games a year or something like that, so clearly makes a big difference. Candonian says, I'm an indie developer and wondered what the chances of me pitching to you would be. This is what you get for having this communist attitude where everybody's equal in your game development studio. Now everyone wants to get in on it and just have you make the game for them. So you better be nice to Candonian. What do you say? What do you have to say to him?
I don't know. This would be a little bit of an awkward situation.
Yeah, I just feel there's a Pandora's box here that's about to be opened.
I think we're gonna get thousands of emails tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, if people want to give us their game ideas and we get to keep them, then I'm all on board. But
that can be so. As you know, there can be a lot of legal mess that happens in that. I've heard quite a few developers who try to be, because it's the internet now, they're trying to be nice and open, and they go on the message boards and they say, oh, you guys are having really great ideas. We'll use that idea and give you like 1% of the profits, and then lawsuits ensue, and it gets really ugly these days.
Yeah, so I would suggest maybe people make their own demos of their own ideas.
In fact, it's a little bit weird because we even internally we have too many ideas that we're trying to narrow down. So like throwing more into the mix just makes it even more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that's something a lot of people, and it's bad news. I remember when I first heard it, I was probably like 20. I was really depressed. But some very experienced artists told me, oh, you have a good idea? That's great. You better work really hard on making it way better crafted than anyone else's idea, because ideas are happening, thousands per minute everywhere across the world, and they're all frickin' great. But if you start your own game development studio, it's because you put the work in to make your ideas, and you don't get to make all of your ideas. You had 3 or 4 ideas come out of that game jam. You won't get to make all of those, no matter how good they are. So people with great ideas, it's great that you have great ideas, but other people can't make them for you. They can barely get their own ideas made before they die. Is that right? Did I say that right?
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah.
And like Guacamelee was also like, it was a great idea at the time. It was our favorite idea. It took 2 years to get it out the door. So the great idea takes 2 years. You don't really have a lot of opportunity to actually finish all of these ideas. So yeah.
But I would encourage people, if they really want, don't be afraid to make a simple game, or at least use a current editor out there like Unity, for example, just to make a basic idea and see if it's fun, and then go with it.
Yeah, or even Flash. Like some of the Flash games that are out there are fantastic, and then a lot of them actually turn into retail or console games like
or someone
Boy or N+.
Or someone steals your Flash game and makes it into a really good game. But whichever, whatever.
Geek Babble asks, truthfully, be truthful now, how important is story to you guys when you think of creating a new game? Why would you be? I didn't think you would lie about that necessarily. They want to make sure you're truthful, though. Would you say you focus more on gameplay, or do you feel it's even when it comes to story?
Don't lie.
Don't lie. I don't know. For Guacamelee, we always had like ideas for the story, and we I don't know. There was a bit of struggle on that side actually. We wanted to make the story great, and we capture some of the elements of it, like the story arc with El Presidente's daughter, the way that the game ends the first time you play through, and stuff like that. I think we captured that, but maybe not as well as we had hoped initially. And I don't know. I do think we spent more time on the gameplay than on the story, and the story we kind of realized closer to the end of the project that the story needed work, and it was a bit of a panic in trying to get that as good as we can, but up until that point, the focus was more on the gameplay, so the story kind of fell behind a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I know what I'm going to say. I've read before, too, from other devs, is that, story is really important. The thing about story is it helps to have a full-time writer on board or on the team, right? And so larger companies can do this, and for a smaller company, you don't really have the capacity to have someone on the team whose only job is to do story, because essentially that's what it takes, right? Even a simple story might seem simple and say, oh, well, I easily could have thought of that and integrated it. But when it actually comes down to developing the story so it's working with the gameplay, but you're also developing the gameplay at the same time, it's really a full-time job. So if you have a small team, you don't necessarily have the resources to allocate someone to that as a full-time position. So that might... Yeah, sometimes that's a scramble in the end, like Graham said.
Yeah, and I feel like from really early on in the project, we had a good idea of like the high-level story arc, and we had a really good idea of what each character's personality was going to be like. But then actually, like communicating that to the player through dialogues and stuff. That's where our real challenge came, because we don't have a writer on staff, and a lot of the dialogue was written by different people, like
Constantly.
Yeah, and so it's a little bit inconsistent sometimes. And there was also at the same time trying to make the dialogue humorous. So like trying to communicate story plot points and then also trying to make it humorous. It was quite a challenge, actually. Yeah.
It's we're in this future where people expect, like if Pac-Man came out today, it would have to have cutscenes, or else people would be like, probably not worth it. But you were making a game that's very gameplay focused, I thought, but the story complemented it very well. I feel like you guys seem too hard on yourselves, the game. I mean, for you, you know what you wanted it to be, and maybe it didn't turn out the way you imagined, but me, just going into it fresh, I felt like the narrative complementing the ideas that Juan is going through this ordeal, but it's at the same time light and humorous at times, but then scary, and you covered a lot of the range that a lot of other developers don't quite pull off. I think you did great. Very good. Iconic, memorable characters that look the way they act, they talk the way they look, and they fit in with the way it plays. So well done, gentlemen.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, appreciate that.
I can just imagine, though, that it is good that you're kind of hard on yourselves, though, because that almost always leads to better games in the future. It's the developers that are like, oh, yeah, I nailed it. Know exactly how to do this game thing. Then you see the same game from them for 10 years after that, and it's all right, but not always. You guys know Itagaki? He's a Ninja Gaiden guy.
Yeah.
He's pretty sure he's the best at everything, and that it didn't work out for him. Poor Itagaki. Well, I think we're out of questions. Oh, and we're out of time. I totally went over time, like a dink. But we did get cut off a little bit because technical problems. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you guys wanted to talk about? I feel like I was off direction a lot this episode. I hope it was okay. And you still have time to speak your mind on anything we might have missed. So, anything in there?
Not really. I mean, if you don't know anything about our games, you should maybe look them up. Maybe.
Absolutely. I could rant about your games all day. It's a style that takes the best of the way it's iconographic imagery, direct gameplay that hits hard, simple ideas executed in a way that allows for depth. I could go on and on. Guacamelee is my favorite game that you did. Not that your other ones are bad. That game, it's pretty good, you guys. I was impressed from the second I saw it, and then it was even better when I actually played it. It's really good.
Thanks a lot, John. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's true. I should go play it. And read the review. Read it on Dtoid.com. It's a good review. So they can follow you at Drinkbox_studios on Twitter, and then each of you have
no underscore.
No
Drinkbox
underscore. My
Studios.
bad. Yeah. Sorry. Oh, you've got an underscore in your Twitter, right, Graham?
Yeah, that's right. Graham underscore Drinkbox.
Yeah, sorry. So I think we didn't even say it right the first time. So at Drinkbox Studios is probably the best Twitter to follow, and then Graham. What's your Twitter?
Graham underscore Drinkbox, and Chris is cool. It's KULZ.
It's true. Mine's much shorter and easier to remember.
Yeah.
And you've got the Robotech guy with the robot eye on your Twitter profile. It's pretty impressive.
Oh yeah, it's nice when people recognize Commander Brute. It's true.
Yeah, I was worried I was going to mispronounce his name. Would you guys make a Robotech game, please?
Oh my God! I constantly try to make. Listen, every time we have a game pitch, one of them is always some sort of Robotech. I'm a massive Robotech fan.
That would be so perfect because Robotech combines the themes of the story with the events, the science fiction of it, and just the action perfectly. A lot of great icons and good old Macross. Or do you like the other ones too, like Mostpedia and New Generation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're as good as the original, but I definitely like New Gen and then the rest of them. I mean, I take anything I can get now, but yeah, I grew up on those pretty hard, so they have a special place in my heart, and hopefully one day Drinkbox will be able to fulfill that desire.
Did you ever hear the original Macross theme song? that because Harmony Gold released it just as Macross at first, and then later picked up the whole Robotech. Have you ever heard that?
I think I have. I mean, I have the original, like the original edition from Japanese edition, and then the Harmony Gold one. I have various editions that some of them don't even make sense. I'm not sure where they came from. So I'm assuming I came across the original theme song, but I could be wrong. Well, I'm pretty sure I've heard it.
Do you remember the lyric? You strange hog. That's my favorite lyric. He says the Macross is a hog.
Maybe I haven't heard it. We should actually we should talk offline about this, and then maybe you can inform me on something I'm missing out. That would make me very excited.
I'll sign off by saying you can follow me, Tron on Twitter. You can buy a Bidoof Shock Infinite poster that the artist of Bidoof Shock Infinite made. You can buy that on Destructoid.com. And you can watch the show on the Dtoid TV on YouTube or listen to it on iTunes later on. And that theme song ends with the man singing. The deep voice man goes, Super Space Fortress, come! Backros! Bye.